Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Bhattajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhattajana Ranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Yamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Mr. Bhad Paramahansa Parujikacharya Astotar Tata Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON VBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jaya Vishnupad Paramahansa Parujikacharya Astotar Tata Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavini Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. Whoops, that was a mistake. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, great. So I have the one book that has the wrong pages on it. So we're beginning chapter 4. Someone can announce the page. It is probably 186 or something like that, right? 185? 181. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Okay. On this 10th day of May, 2022 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are beginning chapter 4 today, entitled Transcendental Knowledge, on page 181 of most of your books. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Imam Vivasvate Yogam Proktavan Ahamabhyayam Vivasvan Manave Praha Manu Ikshvakave Abravit Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Imam Vivasvate Yogam Proktavan Ahamabhyayam Vivasvan Manave Praha Manu Ikshvakave Bravit Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Imam Vivasvate Yogam Proktavan Ahamabhyayam Vivasvan Manave Praha Manurikshvakave Bravit Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Imam Vivasvate Yogam Proktavan Ahamabhyayam Vivasvan Manave Praha Manurikshvakave Bravit. Oh, Prabhu. Sorry. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Imam Vivasvate Yogam Proktavan Ahamabhyayam Manurikshvakave Bravit. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Imam Vivasvate Yogam Proktavan Ahamabhyayam Vivasvan Manave Praha Manurikshvakave Bravit. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Imam Vivasvate Yogam Proktavan Ahamabhyayam Vivasvan Manave Praha Manurikshvakave Bravit. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Imam Vivasvate Yogam Proktavan Ahamabhyayam Manave Praha Manurikshvakave Bravit. In Zoom land.
Shri Bhagavanu Vacha
Shri Bhagavanu Vacha
Imam Vivasvate Yogam
Imam Vivasvate Yogam
Proktavam Aham Abhayam
Proktavan Ahamabhyayam
Vivasvan Manave Praha
Vivasvan Manave Praha
Manurikshvakave Bravit.
Manurikshvakave Bravit. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, said, Imam, this, Vivasvate, unto the Sun God, Yogam, the science of one's relationship to the Supreme. Proktavan, instructed, Aham, I, Abhyayam, imperishable, Vivasvan, Vivasvan, the Sun God's name, Manave, unto the Father of mankind of the name Vivasvata. Praha told Manahu, the Father of mankind, Ikshvakave, unto King Ikshvaku. Abravit said. The Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, said, I instructed this imperishable science of yoga to the sun god, And Vivasvan instructed it to Manu, the father of mankind. and Manu in turn instructed it to Ikshvaku. Purport. Herein we find the history of the Bhagavad Gita traced from a remote time when it was delivered to the royal order of all planets, beginning with the sun planet. The kings of all planets are especially meant for the protection of the inhabitants, and therefore the royal order should understand the science of the Bhagavad Gita in order to be able to rule the citizens and protect them from material bondage to lust. Human life is meant for cultivation of spiritual knowledge in eternal relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the executive heads of all states and all planets are obliged to impart this lesson to the citizens by education, culture, and devotion. In other words, the executive heads of all states are intended to spread the science of Krishna consciousness so that the people may take advantage of this great science and pursue a successful path, utilizing the opportunity of the human form of life. In this millennium, the sun god is known as Vivasvan, the king of the sun, which is the origin of all planets within the solar system. In the Brahma Samhita 552, it is stated, I'll say you say, maybe just you say, but we'll have a little. Yat chakshuresha sabita sakalagrahanam Raja samasta sudamurti rashesha tejaha Yasyagya brahmati sambita kala chakro Govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. Let me worship, Lord Brahma said, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda, Krishna, who is the original person and under whose order the sun, which is the king of all planets, is assuming immense power and heat. The sun represents the eye of the Lord and traverses its orbit in obedience to his order. The sun is the king of the planets, and the sun god, at present of the name Vivasvan, rules the sun planet, which is controlling all other planets by supplying heat and light. He is rotating under the order of Krishna, and Lord Krishna originally made Vivasvan his first disciple to understand the science of the Bhagavad Gita. The Gita is not, therefore, a speculative treatise for the insignificant mundane scholar, but is a standard book of knowledge coming down from time immemorial. In the Mahabharata, Shanti Parva 348, 51, 52, we can trace out the history of the Gita as follows. Also you say, Treta yugado chatato Vivasvan manabedadao Manushchaloka Brityartham Sutayek Shvaka Vedadao Ikshvakunacha Katito Vyapya Lokan Avastitaha. In the beginning of the millennium known as Treta Yuga, this science of the relationship with the Supreme was delivered by Vivasvan to Manu. Manu, being the father of mankind, gave it to his son, Maharaj Ikshvaku, the king of this earth planet, and forefather of the Raghu dynasty in which Lord Ramchandra appeared. Therefore, the Bhagavad Gita existed in human society from the time of Maharaj Ikshvaku. At the present moment, we have just passed through 5,000 years of the Kali Yuga, which lasts 432,000 years. Excuse me. Before this, there was Dwapara Yuga, 800,000 years, and before that, there was Treta Yuga, 1,200,000 years. Thus, some 2,005,000 years ago, Manu spoke the Bhagavad Gita to his disciple and son Maharaj Ikshvaku, the king of this planet Earth. The age of the current Manu is calculated to last some 305,300,000 years, of which 120,400,000 have passed, accepting that before the birth of Manu, the Gita was spoken by the Lord to his disciple, the sun god Vivasvan. A rough estimate is that the Gita was spoken at least 120,400,000 years ago, and in human society it has been extant for 2 million years. It was spoken by the Lord again to Arjuna about 5,000 years ago. That is the rough estimate of the history of the Gita, according to the Gita itself, and according to the version of the speaker, Lord Sri Krishna. It was spoken to the sun god Vivasvan because he is also a Kshatriya and is the father of all Kshatriyas, who are descendants of the sun god, or the Surya Vangsha Kshatriyas. Because the Bhagavad Gita is as good as the Vedas, being spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, this knowledge is apaurushaya, superhuman. Since the Vedic instructions are accepted as they are without human interpretation, the Gita must therefore be accepted without mundane interpretation. The mundane wranglers may speculate on the Gita in their own ways, but that is not the Bhagavad Gita as it is. Therefore, the Bhagavad Gita has to be accepted as it is from the disciplic succession, and it is described herein that the Lord spoke to the sun god spoke to his son, Manu, and Manu spoke to his son, Ikshvaku. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance to him and all members of Sri Parampara. So I always found it very interesting that this chapter begins with Krishna speaking about this yoga process I spoke to Vivasvan. But what is that yoga process? He just finished the last chapter. He didn't mention any specific yoga process here. He just said that the last verse was Evam Buddhe Param Buddha, thus knowing oneself to be transcendental to the material senses, mind and intelligence, O mighty Arjuna. One should steady the mind by deliberate spiritual intelligence, Krishna consciousness, and thus by spiritual strength conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. So that's implying a yoga process there. Because conquering over the whole last part of the last chapter dealt with our eternal enemy, which is lust, material desire, strong material desire, which is nothing but strong spiritual desire, love for Krishna, that's been perverted by contact with the material energy. Because Prabhupada explains this in the purports here. So we, being part and parcel of Krishna, we also have senses, we have a body, we have a form, and we have desire. Now the healthy form of that desire is that it's directed back to Krishna in loving devotional service. And we feel Krishna's reciprocal love. And this is what's going on in the spiritual world, in all varieties of relationships. Prabhupada talks about them in the introduction to this book. We have this Shanta Ras. Ras is not translatable into English. So we use this term that was given by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur called mellows, or mellow. If you look it up in a dictionary, mellow is not a noun. But mellow means, in the lingo that Prabhupada adopted, the pleasure that comes from a relationship. So the relationship, the first one is the Shanta Ras. Now, example of Shanta Ras would be Krishna's flute. The flute will sit there or be tucked into his sash, and nothing's happening. The flute is just ready to be used. So that's a Shanta or peaceful Ras. The ground in Vrindavan, the grass is just waiting for Krishna to walk on them. They don't have any active service to perform. But their success is when Krishna walks on them and some dust falls and they're very ecstatic. You see? Shanta Ras means, the definition is completely detached from any tinge of material desire, completely remembering Krishna at every moment, could be, and satisfied with that situation. In other words, just satisfied thinking of Krishna. It's kind of a very yogic thing to do, you see. But that's just one of the 5 rasas. The next one up is called Dasya Ras. Dasya Ras, which means servant. Let's just define right away that the word servitude is not what we want to think about. Servitude, you look it up in the dictionary, and you find it means a slave mentality. Servitude is what the slaves went through in America in 1860 and before. So that's not what this is about. Prabhupada also used the term servitorship. We're going to use that term, servitorship. In other words, it's being completely satisfied with that position of being a servant of Krishna. What does a servant mean? It means trying to fulfill the desires of the master, but always feeling oneself in an inferior position. And this is what's going on in Vaikuntha. Vaikuntha, you have Lakshmi Narayan there, And everyone else knows their position as a servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even though they have the same form, they also have the four hands and everything, but they don't have the Srivats mark. There's a special mark with Vishnu. So that, and there's also servitorship in Vrindavan, Goloka Vrindavan. You find, especially when Krishna grows up a little, he has these younger friends who are always acting as his servants, you know. And the gopis also, you know, of course they have a conjugal relationship, but each rasa includes the previous one. Those who are servants, they're always thinking of Krishna. They're satisfied completely satisfied thinking of Krishna, but they want to perform some active service. And that's really the base. That's where bhakti begins, really. That's where bhakti yoga begins. To somehow do some service for God. If you come to the temple, say, "Oh, nice you could come on the weekend. Thank you. We just had the Sunday feast. Can you help wash the pots?" I said, "Yeah, I like to wash Krishna's pots. You know, because when you wash Krishna's pots, you can think of Krishna, and you know." So that's basic bhakti. So, and we shouldn't think that. Then there's the friendship ras, Sakya ras. Krishna's famous coward boyfriends of the same age. Balaram is also in that role, although he's an expansion of Krishna, of course. And that's we've all had friends. Remember when you were a kid? You know, go out and play. You know, do the kids do that anymore? They all look at the screens. Anyway, it's perversion. When I was growing up, it wasn't screens. You know, you go out to play, and you know, because we played sports and we played hide and seek, and you know, we cavorted around.
No, it's the virtual reality.
What is that?
Now they play in virtual reality.
Yeah, virtual reality. Anyway, the perverted reflections have become more perverted. Then you have parental ras, very famous. Madhya Yashoda, Ananda, and all the elder gopis especially are loving Krishna. He takes this role. This is unique in theology. God takes the role of a little helpless child and delighting everyone crawling around in the yard, you know. And the wonderful thing is the great authors such as Jiva Goswami and Rupa Goswami have written beautiful Sanskrit poems about Krishna crawling in the yard, you know. I'll give you a sample. This is in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and he's describing parental ras, called Vatsalya ras. So one of the verses goes like this: Kwanada kanika kinkani kalapam smita mukhamujjala nasika gramuktam kadaditana vanita pinnamangre taniyam avekshanananda patni. You know this verse? You know this one, right? He knows it. He knows it. So, Kwanata Kanika Kinkani Kalapam. So you can hear the poetry. Each word begins with K, and inside the words is K. So Kwanata means tinkling very beautifully. Kanika is gold. Kinkani is his waist bells. You got these golden waist bells. He's crawling toward his mother, carrying a little butterball in one hand. Aren't there like a lot of statues like that in like a lot on altars in India? Probably 100 million. Of those, you know. So, Kwanata Kanika Kinkani Kalapam. Kalapam is a series of bells. Kwanata Kanika Kinkani Kalapam. Smita Mukham. His face is smiling very sweetly, you know, without the teeth showing, just smiling at his mother. Ujjvala Nasika Gramuktam. And he's got a pearl affixed to the tip of an effulgent pearl affixed to the tip of his nose. That's all he's wearing. He's got the ankle bells and the pearl and the butterball. That's his ornaments. And in his hand, Kadajita Navanitam Pitam, Navanita Pindam Agre. So a pindam is a ball. So he's got a little fresh butterball in his hand, and he's crawling toward his mother, smiling sweetly with a little, you know, folded pearl. You can just visualize. And then it says, Taniyam Aveksha. So she sees him, and Nanda Patni. Nanda Patni is a name for Yashoda, the wife of Nanda. And Nananda means delighted. She's in ecstasy. Ananda, Nananda. Nanda Patni. So this scenes. So just see if you can understand the meaning. Kwanata kanika kinkani kalapam smita mukam udvana nasika gramuktam kadadita navanita pinnamangve taniyam avekshan Nanda Patni. Now this isn't, obviously you wouldn't take the trouble to compose such an exquisite verse about some ordinary child calling before his mother. It's because this is the Supreme Personality of Godhead who's taken that form just to evoke these sentiments of maternal love from his mother, who's his eternal mother in the spiritual world. And this is Krishna Bhakti. And then you have the highest Ujjvala Ras, Madhurya Ras of the gopis of Vrindavan, who are all in love with Krishna, but a lot of them are married to someone else, or they're young girls, and they're supposed to stay at home, But Krishna goes out, and he goes out walking, and he plays his flute and with the boys, and they're thinking of him. There's beautiful verses, beautiful chapters in the Bhagavatam describing what they're doing, what they're singing, and what they're thinking of as they do their chores at home. Their minds go out with Krishna, and they think of him as he's playing, and he's playing the flute, what he's wearing, how he's cavorting on Govardhan Hill, and all these different things. So this is the ultimate end of the yoga system that Krishna is introducing now. So back to our Bhagavad Gita verses. So Krishna is in the last few verses of the third chapter, he described how in ordinary consciousness human beings are bound by material desire, a series of material desire. If you have no exposure to Krishna in any of the forms, sound forms, philosophy, anything like this, you're just living an ordinary Western life, then you're still part and parcel of God. You still have that desire, but it's expressed through your senses and your mind in relation to the material energy. This is called conditioned life. And the body is obviously limited. The senses are limited, mind is limited, and we're limited in time. We're all mortal. But still, we try to enjoy these relationships, these 5 relationships. But it's frustrating because they can produce just the opposite thing. Just like this karma, you fall in love with some girl or something, and she's apparently in love with you, then someone else steals her, then you get angry at that guy, and you want to kill him, or you can't, he's too big, and you get depressed, and you just go take a drug somewhere. This is material life. Right? It happens to everybody. You're growing up, So, but still, because we're part and parcel of Krishna, we try to keep enjoying in this way, and we violate the laws of God. We lose the human form of life and go down into some animal life or something. They also have their senses they're trying to enjoy, but it's much more rudimentary. The consciousness is covered. The same living entity is there, part and parcel of God, but the consciousness gets more and more covered. You remember, those who were here, this is one of the things he says, right? Avitam jnanametena jnanino nitya vaidana. This eternal enemy of lust covers the consciousness of the living entity. That's us. Jnana nitya vaidana kama rupena kondera krishtushparena lena. This, in the form of lust, it's never satisfied. You can go on millions of births trying to fulfill your unfulfilled desires, and getting them fulfilled a little bit, then being frustrated, and then going on here and here, and it's until you come in touch with this knowledge. And if we as we study this Bhagavad Gita, Krishna will give us very cogent instructions of how we can sublimate this lust into love, back into love of God. Prabhupada says that it needs to be transmuted. How? By taking these very senses that are now, remember, senses, mind, and intelligence, the sitting places of the lust. So we have to use the senses, the mind, and intelligence in relation to Krishna. So the first sense, the tongue, and the next sense is the ear. So the first, if you just Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna is all powerful. He has appeared in his name. Nama Chintamani Krishna Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha Purna Kshuddha Nitya Bhukta Abhinat Vanama Namino. He loves the name. It's wonderful kirtaniya. So this is Lord Chaitanya's mercy. Krishna, in the form of Lord Chaitanya, has made it very, very easy to contact him and to start purifying ourselves of this lust. How? Because if he's non-different from his name, Krishna is all attractive. That's the meaning of the name Krishna. Then if we just vibrate with some concentration, a little understanding, but mainly concentration and hearing and chanting, then our mind and our heart begins to be drawn to Krishna and become purification of the heart. Cheto darpana marjanam. And so that's the essence of the process of bhakti that Krishna will delineate here, but more in more detail in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in really great detail in Chaitanya Charitamrita and Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So the yoga that he's describing, there has to be a principle of yoga by which we can connect with Krishna. And so that yoga, Krishna says, I described this millions of years ago. It's not something new. You know, it's something that's always been around. It's eternal, but I've been hiding from it and in ignorance for all these years. So Srila Prabhupada, out of his mercy, came as a representative of Krishna, representative of the parampara, the disciplic succession, and he explained all these. And as he makes very clear in the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, that the Bhagavad Gita can also be covered. That's why he said, this is the Bhagavad Gita as it is. It's not some, speculative philosophy book that you can just put your own interpretation on. Bhagavad Gita existed in translation in the West for at least 150 years before Prabhupada got here. Because you had the British, the English, ruling India. So some of them were intellectual. They learned Sanskrit. They learned about Bhagavad Gita. But I don't know if any of them became devotees. So they take it back to England and they, mix it with whatever they got there, And they come up with a translation which is maybe not accurate. Certainly they can't explain it. And you may come in touch with it, but you don't know what to do. I did. I read this little Penguin edition. It was fascinating, but I had no idea what I was supposed to do at the end. But when you read Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, you know what you're supposed to do before you get to the end. He puts bhakti in it practically every. So, any questions on this verse? This idea of the history of the Gita, very important, and Krishna will describe also why he comes. He comes. Yes, sure. We have the mic here.
Krishna.
Anyway.
So Bhagavad Gita was pretty much spoken in every yuga, like Satyug, Treta Yuga, Dwapar Yuga, and just right before the Kali Yuga began, right? When Krishna said Bhagavad Gita
right before Kali Yuga, yeah.
Yeah. So it was pretty much.
Well, whether the Bhagavad Gita was spoken, Krishna doesn't. He appears in the Dwapara Yuga of a certain Manvantara, which is a rule of Manu, in each day of Brahma. So I'm not sure exactly in what form it might be, but it's part of the Mahabharata, which was spoken at that time, But as Krishna will explain in the next verse, it gets distorted by the force of time. This is evam parampara paptam im rajasya yoga dusakalene mahata yogo nashtak parantaba. This yoga I'm speaking of is destroyed or distorted just by the inevitable force of time. And therefore Krishna appears millennium after millennium, not as himself in the original form once in a day, but in some form, and most importantly as his representatives, the gurus, the sadhus, and the shastra. This is how he reaches out to us, and he's looking for those submissive hearers, those who are open to be hearing, and that's what the great devotees do. They travel and they try to give the same thing. So we have to try to recognize the absolute nature of Krishna. That yes, he doesn't come in the form of Krishna at this time in his original form. And Kavod in Vrindavan. He did that 5,000 years ago, which is just a split second compared to these timelines that we're seeing here. 120 million years, in the lifetime of Brahma. So we're practically contemporaries, certainly of Lord Chaitanya. That's in recorded history. But he does it for us. He's taking the trouble to come to this world and to beat down the demons who have distorted Dharma. He wants to reinstitute Dharma, because without Dharma, it's just animal society. And we're all his children. He claims that, of all living entities, what is it? Sarva Yonisha Konteya, Murtiya Sambhavan, Sarva Yonisha Konteya, Murtiya Sambhavan, Tasam Brahma Maharyona, Aham Bija Pradakpata. I am the seed-giving father of every living being. So he takes that seriously. He's the father. So he has a responsibility to try to help us to get back to safety, to the spiritual world. So that's the dynamic here. And yes, he came and spoke the Bhagavad Gita, but even in the 5,000 years since he spoke it, it's become distorted. And so he's come as Lord Chaitanya, and the disciplic succession, are coming to give it as it is. That way we can really benefit from the medicine. We can cure this birth and death disease. All right, so let's see what we have here. This next verse is very important. Now I want to make an announcement before I forget. Unfortunately, tomorrow I can't give class because I have a international BBT call at 7 p.m. and I won't be able to come. And I also have a couple of more books, 3 more books of these Vyasa Puja books. Those who were here last night. Did you get one? You got one, okay. You didn't get one. Oh, I must give you. Also, I was giving out little bags of Vrindavan dust. Yes, which I got in 1975, before my first trip. I went around and around, I collected all this dust. I've had it ever since. And I said, well, let me give some of it out, So there's a price for that, if you take some dust. And that is you have to take one book, Vyasa Puja book, for free. That's the price. I only have 3 left out of like 30 or 40 that I had. So those are available. All right.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
What is the difference between Shantaras and Dasyaras?
Shantaras and Dasyaras?
Yes, Prabhupada.
Oh, well, Shantaras is not active service. Shantaras is kind of passive. This is very nicely explained in, I think, the teachings of Rupa Goswami in chapter 19 of the Madhya Lila, where he talks about the 5 rasas and the characteristics. And it's important to realize that each subsequent ras includes the mellows relations of the previous ras. So the qualities, Shanta rasa, as I described, is you're always thinking of Krishna, completely satisfied with thinking remembrance, and you have no attraction for material sense gratification. And so your varieties of thinking of Krishna and hoping that he will somehow use you, to somehow relate to you. Like the flute is passive, but it performs important service when it gets active like that. But it doesn't actively do it. Dasya Ras is actively serving Krishna. And it doesn't have to be in the human form, but that's Krishna has his many servants there in Vrindavan, and I mentioned like Vaikuntha is ideal for that, because everyone knows Krishna is God. You see, the thing about Goloka Vrindavan is they don't know Krishna is God, because if they knew Krishna is God, how could they, his friends insult him and get on his back and do all these things that he loves them? This is what's so wonderful, that Krishna hides his majesty in order to evoke these more intimate relationships, which friends feel free to cavort with him freely and to wrestle with him, and see if they can beat him, and he allows himself to lose sometimes. So that's Sakya Ras. So servant is, service is the basic principle of bhakti. We're trying to come to that point where we always feel that we are serving Krishna and we want to serve Krishna. But what are those services? 9 different services. Hearing, chanting, remembering, like that. Now one of them is serving the lotus feet, of course, like deity worship. But just to hear, this is service. Hearing Krishna's words from the Bhagavad Gita. I'm doing my best to transmit them purely, please forgive me any distortions or omissions. But this is Krishna's very pleased with this, that you're listening to Bhagavad Gita. Out of all the people in this city, how many are actually listening to Bhagavad Gita right now? I can probably count them right here, plus online. So hearing, chanting, remembering, all of that is part of service. And when you become more purified, you may feel that you want to be a friend of Krishna in the spiritual world. That's also service. His friends are performing invaluable service. What does service mean? To please the one who's being served, to know what they like, like the wife knows what the husband likes to eat and cooks it, so he's pleased. So there's service there, and this mutual service. And then a more intimate, so the servants are also always thinking of Krishna, and they're not at all attracted to material things. So they have the qualities of Shantaras, but the added service. And when that service becomes more intimate and exuberant, then it becomes Sakya-ras. That's a friendship. The friends are performing wonderful service, and sometimes Krishna, as I say, he wrestles with them, and he loses the wrestling match. He likes to do that. So that's you don't get that in service. Service is always, oh, Krishna is the master and I'm the servant. Sometimes for the servants, they take the role of the master and Krishna becomes the servant. Just like Arjuna, he's driving the chariot here. They're intimate friends, you know. And then, of course, parental ras, vatsalya. They're always thinking of Krishna. Mother is 100% thinking of Krishna. She's fully satisfied, not a tinge of sense gratification. So there's sakya ras. And who can be a better friend of the child than the mother? Always, you know, fulfilling his needs, making sure he's safe, wondering about his welfare. There's friendship there. But that maintenance idea, that, oh, if I don't feed him, he'll die, you know, like that. So that's not there in friendship. And then finally the conjugal ras, where just, you know, I'll break all the rules and regulations, whatever Krishna wants. You know, he wants to be with me. And you know, they're also the best friends. They're always thinking of Krishna, maintenance. They're ready to do anything for Krishna. So that's some of the rasas. There's difference. One enfolds the other. The servants are also shanta. They're also not thinking of anything but Krishna, fully satisfied. Yeah. Okay, let's read one more here.
I have a request from the Zoom user. So we have Vishnupriya Dasa with us, and she wanted you to save one of the books and some Vrindavan dust.
Okay. All right. I won't be here tomorrow night. I'll be here tomorrow morning, but I'll save that. I'll save one book and some Vrindavan dust for who's the name? What's the name?
Vishnupriya Dasa.
Vishnupriya. Okay.
Thank you, Prabhu. I'll send you the shipping charges.
Sure. All right. Let's do this text, which is important. Then we'll have a kirtan. Evam parampara praptam. Imam raja shayo viduhu. Sakale neha mahata. Yogo nashtak parantapa. This supreme science was thus received through the chain of disciplic succession, and the saintly kings understood it in that way. But in course of time, the succession was broken, and therefore the science as it is appears to be lost. What is this mahata? Great. Yes, the great, powerful time. That's what's happened, it's destroyed it. Purport. It is clearly stated that the Gita was especially meant for the saintly kings. This is called Rajarshis, because they were to execute its purpose in ruling over the citizens. Certainly the Bhagavad Gita was never meant for the demonic persons who would dissipate its value for no one's benefit and would devise all types of interpretations according to personal whims. As soon as the original purpose was scattered by the motives of the unscrupulous commentators, there arose the need to establish the disciplic succession. 5,000 years ago, that should probably be reestablished. 5,000 years ago, oh, that's what it said, reestablished. 5,000 years ago, it was detected by the Lord himself that the disciplic succession was broken, and therefore he declared that the purpose of the Gita appeared to be lost. In the same way, at the present moment also, there are so many editions of the Gita, especially in English, but almost all of them are not according to authorized disciplic succession. There are innumerable interpretations rendered by different mundane scholars, but almost all of them do not accept the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, although they make a good business on the words of Sri Krishna. This spirit is demonic, because demons do not believe in God, but simply enjoy the property of the Supreme. Since there is a great need of an edition of the Gita in English, as it is received by the parampara or disciplic succession system, an attempt is made herewith to fulfill this great want. The Bhagavad Gita, accepted as it is a great boon to humanity. But if it is accepted as a treatise of philosophical speculations, it is simply a waste of time. Okay. Now, one thing is to watch for when you read Prabhupada's books. There's certain words that he uses that they have used in the meaning that you'll find in the Oxford English Dictionary, but not in the Modern American Dictionary. And one of those is the word purpose. Purpose is often used to mean purpose, what we know as purpose. But it's often used to mean purport, meaning. Just like these word purport at the beginning of each commentary. So when it says, And therefore he declared that the purpose of the Gita appeared to be lost. Now, of course, that's true. The purpose is to teach us why we should surrender to Krishna and give us information about yoga and all these different things. But the purport was also lost. The actual meaning of the import of the verses is distorted. And sometimes you'll find it's very obvious that Prabhupada means purport by purpose. But there are certain words like that. I'll call your attention to them when they arrive. Another one is, what is it? It doesn't come to mind. No, it's something. So this is a very important verse because it describes the way in which the knowledge comes down. Sometimes it's described like visualize a big mango tree, big healthy mango tree, and it's the season. I don't know what's the mango season. Is it autumn or whatever? And so they're all ripe and they're all up high in the tree. Well, how do you get it? Well, you have to get up there with a ladder, right? But you can't just one guy gets up there and throws them down on the ground and they'll all break. You have to carefully bring those ripe mangoes down, handing them down. Maybe someone will be halfway up the tree so that they don't burst. They're so full of juice. So similarly, this knowledge is very precise. If it's distorted anywhere along the way, it's going to ruin the disciplic succession. So that's why the acharyas, the line of the realized acharyas is so important. Acharya meaning one who knows the Shastra, the real purpose and purport of the Shastra, who lives it, and who teaches it. And that's why we have this disciplic succession of realized acharyas who have handed it down. And so we're actually getting the meaning of Krishna's words as he intended them to be spoken. And that's invaluable. And it all culminates in 2 verses in chapter 18, which summarizes the whole thing. Manmana baba madbhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru mamai vaishasi satyam te pratijane priyosime. Sarvadharma parityaja mame kam sharanam vaja aham tvam savapapebhyo mokshiyasami machacha. Just think of me, become devoted, worship me, and bow down low. You'll come to me, O friend. I promise you this boon I shall bestow. Give up all other dharmas and surrender only unto me. Your sins I'll nullify, O Arjun. From anxiety be free. So this instruction is there eternally. And if we follow it, we'll go back to Krishna. That's what he promises. Okay, so we'll adjourn there and gather for the kirtan. Thank you for your attention. And who's going to take my last books here? Okay. Oh. So someone, you can take those chairs up and don't wait for me. Seems to weigh a lot.